All right, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Pepe Campello, and I'm a partner at McKinsey & Company's Miami office. It's a pleasure to welcome you to our special Future of Leadership series. This is a series presented in collaboration with the University of Miami Herbert Business School. And it is a series where the inspiration stemmed from the remarkable growth we've seen in our professional, in our business community. We think this is the right moment to really spotlight a few of the standout leaders in our community and those who are really making a difference in their own organizations and shaping their own industries right from here in our backyard. So we're very excited to be here with you today and have an opportunity to have a conversation with Brent Saunders. So I'll hand it over to the newly appointed Dean, Paul A. Pavlov. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Pepe. It's such a great pleasure to be here. Welcome everybody to the CEO Speaker Series. My name is Paul A. Pavlov. I've been serving as Dean of Miami Herbert for the last 2.5 months, and it's a great pleasure to have the opportunity to interact with such world-class leaders. And thank you very much to McKinsey for sponsoring and supporting this event. We are very grateful. It gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speaker, our panelist today, Brent Saunders. And because he has such a remarkable bio, I need to actually read it to make full justice to it.
You don't have to do any of it. You can.
Okay, then I will not. But in all seriousness, he has a remarkable career over 25 years in the pharmaceutical, healthcare, medical devices space. So he's currently the CEO and chairman of Bausch Lomb. And interestingly, he started about 1.5 years ago there. And earlier, 2010, 2013, he also served as the CEO of the company. And I have a question for that, Brent. But in the meantime, he also had some very important roles. He was the chairman, president, CEO of Allergan, leading up to a $63 billion acquisition by AbbVie in 2020, quite recently. Earlier, he managed the Forest Laboratories until its merger with Actavis PLC, and subsequently orchestrating Actavis acquisition of Allergan. So a lot of exciting acquisitions the previous 10 years of roles. Earlier, some executive roles in Schering-Plough Corporation and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and he has board positions at Beauty Health Company, ARS Pharmaceuticals, and several private companies. Member of the executive committee of Mount Sinai Medical Center and several other non-for-profit organizations. Academically, he got a bachelor's degree from the University of Pittsburgh and a JD and an MBA from Temple University. That's, I guess, a connection. I also was at Temple for 10 years. So please welcome Mr. Brent Saunders, a pioneer in the pharmaceutical industry.
Thank you.
And Pepe, to you for the first question. So we have a deal here. Since you're sponsoring it, you ask the tough question and I ask the easy question.
That sounds good. He said he will be open to answering any questions. So we'll go through it. We'd love to start, Brent, by reflecting on your career journey. You, of course, have built a very impressive career journey over the last 25 years. You have moved through various roles in the healthcare sector, all the way through executive leadership. And then you have become one of the most influential and successful CEOs in the pharmaceutical industry. We'd love to hear the story of how you got involved in healthcare and any pivotal moments that really guided your career path over the past 25 years.
Yeah, sure. So healthcare, interestingly, I got involved in it a bit by accident. When I went to law school, I had to go as a night student because I had to pay the bills. And so I had to get a job. And as I was looking for a job, I was hired by Thomas Jefferson University, which at the time was just the university, Allied Health University Medical School and University Hospital. It's changed. Healthcare's changed dramatically since that period of time. And so I wound up working in the hospital. and during the day and going to school at night. And so that was my immediate nexus to that. And then as I went to do my MBA after law school, I stayed there and wound up working in their law department. And at the time, managed care was just arriving on the scene. And so they said, oh, you're the new guy just out of law school. You run managed care. Never realizing how important managed care ultimately would come. I guess I'm making myself look old. But how quickly that would become. So it became, by happenstance, it became a more important position. Then I also took over compliance as compliance was emerging. And so from there, I decided to go into consulting. I went to Pricewaterhouse Consulting, and I took on more of a compliance consulting as the federal government and Department of Justice were investigating a lot of hospitals and pharmaceutical companies. It was kind of a new field at the time. And wound up figuring out as a consultant, instead of doing hospitals and doing, $50,000, you'll appreciate this, $50,000 engagements for 50 hospitals. If I focused on pharmaceutical companies, I could do $1 million engagements for 3 customers. Now today you would say 10 million or 15, right, because inflation, but that's how I got into the pharmaceutical industry, was really a move to have bigger, more sophisticated clients.
Yeah, I understand there's also a big purpose element as you then took on executive leadership roles. Maybe how do you think about that purpose and the role that pharmaceutical companies play in the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, so as I've spent close to the last 20 years in the biopharmaceutical and medical device industry, I would say that and I understand it's easy to be jaded from the outside, but on the inside, 99% of all people who work in this industry go to work every day to try to solve some real problem, some unmet medical need, solve a disease, cure a disease, treat a disease, and it is really satisfying to be in an organization that's trying to do great things. Obviously, they're for-profit, and we run them as for-profit. But they are, there really is a dual mandate, and I find it really enjoyable. And even to this day, if I'm in the gym on the treadmill and a commercial comes on for one of the drugs that I played a role in getting approved, and it's on the TV, or someone tells me they're taking it and it makes their, if they have migraines, they no longer have migraines, something like it. It is really satisfying. Mm-hmm. We've done some fun ones too. I created Botox too, but in Miami, that's a great drug. People equally happy in Miami with Botox too. So.
We hear some stories about
I noticed
the
a little
Botox experiences.
Here, right?
I appreciate the live feedback. So thank you, Brent.
All right. Okay. Nice plug for Miami. So, but I guess so. You're here in Miami for the last a year and a half or so. So
I've been here almost 6 years.
6 years. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's you had a new house in the last. Okay.
Yeah.
My bad. Okay. So I guess I want to ask you kind of the transition from Bausch Lomb back in 2010 to 2013. And you're the CEO, and then of course had other roles, and then you came back a decade later, which is very uncommon. Even for any role, especially CEO. So can you just guide us through that transition? And even more interestingly, what did you find attractive after this career coming back, and where you see the future lying ahead?
Yeah, sure. So in 2009, I was the president of a company called Shearing Plow, and I ran their global consumer business. So it was brands like Claritin and Dr. Scholl's and Coppertone and Miralax, a bunch of OTC drugs you would know around the world. And Merck came and acquired our company. So I was a casualty of that integration, right? I didn't have a role in the combined new company. And so I was looking what to do next. I was contacted about becoming CEO of Bausch Lomb. And so I interviewed and got the job. It was my first CEO job. This was late 2009, early 2010. But Bausch Lomb at the time had just gone private through an LBO transaction. So Warburg Pincus had led the consortium, a private equity firm in New York, to take it private. It was quite a troubled company at the time. And so I stepped in as the CEO in early 2010 to do it in a private setting, but try to turn the company around. Almost 4 years later, the end of 2013, Valeant came in and acquired it. So just order of magnitude, we took it private. Don't quote me on the exact numbers. We took it private for like $3.4 billion, and we sold it almost 4 years later to Valeant for $8.7 billion in cash. So the private equity guys did pretty well. Unfortunately, Valeant didn't manage the company very well. You could follow Valeant, and if you Google it, it was not a well-run company. Really gutted the R&D, gutted a lot of the infrastructure of the company. You guys did probably a lot of case studies on this one.
I have.
But the net result was in the Valeant company name went away. They renamed their company Bausch Health. It's still Bausch Health today. But they decided about 2 years ago to spin the company that I sold back out to Bausch Lomb as an independent company again. And when they did that, their board started to call me because I just sold my company to AbbVie. Would I be willing to come back? And I said no for some period of time. Not because I didn't love Bausch Lomb or love eye care or eye health as an area, which I really do and I feel very passionate about. But the ownership structure of Bausch Lomb today is really quite difficult. It's owned, 88% of the stock is still owned by Bausch Health, and they're in a lot of litigation around how to get that stock out. And Bausch Health is controlled by Carl Icahn and John Paulson. So it's a pretty messy situation. That being said, when I really stepped back and thought about it, I love the company. My first CEO job was at the company. More importantly, I love this space. I love eye health. I love the key opinion leaders, the physicians, the surgeons, the optometrists, everybody that we deal with or friends of mine have been in the space for a long time. And so I decided, let me come back. Let's get the company performing well, and then we can deal with the ownership structure.
So maybe we can talk a little bit about Bausch & Lomb today and your vision for the organization. It's a company with an extremely rich history, 170-year-old history and legacy in eye care. It started as an optical goods shop and then went on and built this great reputation around quality and craftsmanship, went on to develop some of the innovations at the time that were really breakthroughs around mass-produced soft contact lenses and advanced ophthalmics. As you think about that Bausch & Lomb that started, grew, and led a lot of the innovations, Bausch & Lomb today, and we'd love to understand your vision of where do you want to take this company and build on this heritage.
Yeah, so maybe just a quick background on Bausch & Lomb to level set. So it's a 170-year-old company, second oldest healthcare company that on record. So J&J is the only older one. And it's you're right, it started pre-Civil War as an optical shop. But as Mr. Bausch and Mr. Lomb tried to figure out how to finance their business, they actually came up with a creative idea. They sent Mr. Lomb to the Union Army to fight in the Civil War, to send his paycheck back to finance the growth of the business. And so that's actually how it started. They've done many things over the years. We actually won an Academy Award, I have it, for cinematography. We created the cameras that were used to do film. We took the first pictures of the moon. We created the most advanced telescopes. We've done a lot of things over the years. But in the 80s, the company moved more into the eye health world and divested brands you may know, like Ray-Ban. We created, divested its telescope, microscope, optics, eyeglasses, and really focused on eye health. In the 70s, we created the soft contact lens. And today we're organized into 4 businesses: pharmaceuticals, contact lenses, consumer products that you see in the drugstore or on Amazon, and then surgical tools and equipment and implants. So lasers to IOLs or ocular implants to everything an ocular surgeon or retina surgeon would need in surgery. Those are 4 global businesses with about 13,000 employees in about 100 countries. So that's the business today. And now I forgot the question.
What is giving all of that and that rich history, and now you're second time as CEO.
Yeah.
What is your vision? Where do you want to take the company?
Yeah, so my goal is to be the best eye health company, and I define best pretty simply. I don't want to be the biggest. You guys may, if you do case studies, I think there's one on Delta where they had a goal of becoming the biggest domestic airline, and they became the worst customer service airline at the same time. And so, I think that's a dangerous way of thinking about it. Best for me is defined simply by two dimensions. Best for us is starting with customer service and really putting the customer first. And that means making sure that our customers have reliable, high-quality supply of great products, right? And how we interact with them and how we service them becomes really critically important and a big focus of what I've been really looking at and working at in the company for the last year and a half since I rejoined. The second dimension is innovation. Particularly important when you work in healthcare. The speed of innovation really does define and impact the first part, right? Because customers want, when they're solving for disease of blindness or vision acuity or your ability to see, people do take their ability to see as a pretty precious gift. And so making sure that we can do that well also means innovation. There is still a tremendous unmet need in terms of restoring vision or preserving vision for patients around the world. And so if we can keep innovating and we can deliver great customer service, everything else kind of works together.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Well, everybody's here about eyes, so let's talk about eyes. Actually, I had an epiphany myself about the importance of eyes before, and I was talking to the dean of the optometry school at the University of Houston, very few optometry schools. And his solution to rural healthcare was not doctors, it was optometrists. And his argument was very simple. Eyesight is the most important thing you have. Mm-hmm. And everything else, and 99% of routine healthcare can be done by an optometrist. So don't have doctors in rural areas, have an optometrist. I don't know if you agree with that. That's not my question. Think about it.
Well, I think I largely agree with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I agree as well. I mean, you explained to me that it's much cheaper. You don't need the whole infrastructure, and everything else that the 1% that needs more serious care go back. Anyway, that was not my question. So you are quite on something that I'd like to. If people around the world took as much care of their eyes as they do their teeth, we could save so much needless suffering. That's a very powerful, well, you said that, so it's
yeah.
true.
Well, look, I didn't know I said it, but yeah.
I found it in a quote, so.
Yeah. I mean, the dichotomy is quite astounding, right? Everyone knows to see their dentist twice a year, get a checkup, get their teeth cleaned. And let's just take a show of hands. How many people have had an eye exam in the last year? That's pretty good.
That's pretty good, actually, yes.
You guys that's impressive. You're way above national averages.
It's a good university here, Brent.
Yes.
Who's trained them well.
Who's wearing Bausch Lomb contact lenses?
But most people, and we've spent lots of money over many years surveying this, most people believe that they can see their eyes are working. And unfortunately, even to your University of Houston Dean of Optometry, he is correct that even children, particularly at young ages, who can't see, become generally learning deficient or learning impaired because if their parents or teachers aren't catching that they can't see, they become less. They don't focus. They don't pay attention. They tend to be less well behaved. They get frustrated, and so it does impact quality of life. But most eye diseases are diseases of aging. That's changing. There's an epidemic of what's called myopia. Anybody know what myopia is? Yeah. And why do you think that's becoming an epidemic? Exactly. So your eyes are muscles, or have muscles in them. And most of us, like when I was a kid, I'll date myself again, your mother kicked you out of the house and you played outside and then you came back in. Maybe you watched an hour of TV, but not a lot. We didn't certainly have phones. But children today are staring at iPads, phones, and screens, and they're not developing the muscle to see far. and it is becoming a massive epidemic proportion health crisis. So outside of that particular disease, most eye diseases are disease of aging, and people tend to not treat their eye disease till they can see it, and most eye diseases are asymptomatic until they become vision impairing, and it's almost impossible in any eye disease today to reverse the damage once it's happened. And so a lot of eye disease is preventable if it's treated early, not so treatable if it's treated by the time it's symptomatic. And so yes, I think if people could get an annual eye exam, that's great. There's also a lot of emerging science. The eye is the gateway to the brain. The retina nerve is the brain, and we're starting to see more diagnostics through the eye exam for diseases like Alzheimer's and others that will be easily or more easily detected that way than any other test today.
So my question, what do you do? What is the future of eye care? That was my question.
Well, I think for us it's really looking at cell and gene therapy. I think the holy grail would be in any of these degenerative eye diseases, whether it be glaucoma or macular degeneration or geographic atrophy, or these large population of eye diseases that are ultimately caused, even with the current intervention, still people will go blind or lose a significant portion of their vision, is to figure out how to solve for that earlier in the cascade or to cause whatever is not happening in your eye that should be happening to happen, right? So to turn on the cells that have been turned off by age or disease, or turn them off if they're on by accident, right?
Excellent.
So I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about deal making. You have a very well-established reputation as a deal maker. You did some of the highest profile deals around the Actavis acquisition of Allergan and Allergan's transaction with AbbVie. I think you did $150 billion worth of deals in just 5 years.
Yeah, 280 total.
280 total. Would love to.
Not that I'm counting.
Exactly. We can still make it 300 or 400. Would love to go into maybe some of those, right? And to the extent you're open to sharing any stories, right, from those, or what was particularly difficult, interesting, any learnings on how you look at those transactions, the risk versus the reward. I bet there are many components, and they're high complex, high stress situations. So would love to talk about that part.
Yeah, sure. But just maybe as a backdrop, strategically, not all deals, but a vast majority of the deals that I did were caused by one particular strategic issue. And that is that in the pharmaceutical space in particular, the costs of R&D have risen dramatically. And so when I started in this industry, having a $600 or $700 million R&D budget was a pretty big budget. Now it's a $7 or $8 billion R&D budget is kind of the standard for big pharma. And so a lot of the companies I've been involved with, there was a lot of consolidation in the industry that was driven in large part around consolidation of R&D and the massive expense. You guys probably have data on this, but what does it take to bring a pharmaceutical to market today? Probably $2 billion.
Two to three, yeah.
Yeah, $2 to $3 billion.
If you count all the failures, yep.
Yeah.
2 to 3.
So, driving innovation is not inexpensive, and in fact, it's high risk, high reward when one works. But I always say the losers pay for the winners, and we never talk about the losers. We only complain about the winners. And so there's a lot of cost in proving the risk benefit of a drug and discovering the science that sits underneath it. And so that has precipitated a lot of the rationale behind it. Other reasons for that I've done deals is to gain scale to markets or gain efficiencies in the distribution of the drugs. And so that tends to be how I think about it. So when I think about deal making, I've done a lot of little ones and a lot of massive ones. I always think about, you lead with the strategic rationale. Why is 1 + 1 something better than 2, right? And if you can't articulate, and I always say this to my boards or to my teams, If you can't say it simply in 30 seconds and everyone says, yeah, that makes sense, then you don't have a strong strategic rationale for the deal, right? If you need, oh, I keep picking on you, but if you need a McKinsey deck of 100 slides to explain the strategic rationale, it doesn't exist. Now, certainly you back it up with that, and those are important and necessary, so I'm saying it a bit tongue-in-cheek.
It's our sponsor,
Yeah.
don't say anything bad.
He knows I love him. He knows I love him, and I love McKinsey, and they add a lot of value. And so please take it in the. But really, if you can't say in the elevator speech why you're doing what you're doing, then you have no permission to even play the game. The second thing is, what's the financial rationale, right? How are you going to pay for the deal? What kind of synergies are you going to get out of the deal? How are you going to make an organization that isn't financially strong is a weak organization, particularly in our industry where R&D is such a major expense line for us, with long, 10-year payoffs on investments being made today. And so, you have to be a little bit more long-term oriented in our industry than just, what's going to work to make the budget for 2025. It has to be, how does this going to look in 2035 when you put it all together? And so that's driven it. Now, all deals have their own personalities and reasons. Sometimes, you can get a deal done because the other opponent or the target has a problem, right? And as a result, the board of that company or the shareholders of that company realize they're better off cashing out now because they can't fix their own problem too quickly or too easily. Other times it's because the target, for example, when I ran Allergan, we had Botox, but I felt that to really maximize our medical aesthetics franchise, we needed to own more than one product in that field. And so strategically, I wanted to create a moat around the dermatologist or plastic surgeon to provide them with all the best products in that particular field. And so we went out and we acquired a lot of little companies that were making one product kind of companies to build a portfolio. And then, marketing and sales-wise, you create a bundle and you create volume-based purchasing, and you create a consumer app with frequent flyer points because you have scale, right? So in that instance, scale made a lot of sense. In other cases, I've looked at it in terms of R&D, right? We were big in neurology at Allergan. We made Alzheimer's treatments, we made mental health drugs, and we looked at how do we get to the greatest science to solve for example, it was a spectacular failure, but was to really look at a novel mechanism for depression. And we spent, I hate to admit it, almost $2 billion to learn that the drug didn't work. And so, there, though, I felt like we had innovated Lexapro. We had created a new drug that's on the market today and doing very well, Vraylar for bipolar depression, schizophrenia, and major depressive disorders. And I felt like if we could solve, in that category, most drugs only work, perhaps 30%, and that may be generous for most patients. And even then, only for some limited period of time. If we could find the real mechanism of action that could change the game for patients with mental health disorders, it was worth the investment. I still have few regrets, maybe how we dosed the patients in the study. I'd love to go back and redo with the benefit of hindsight, but unfortunately you don't get those do-overs.
You always wonder on those when you get the data.
I really do believe with the post-hoc analysis we underdosed, but
yeah,
we saw no safeties. I mean, in fairness, and I say this to my wife all the time, I'll do my PSA for a second. I've been in the drug industry a long time. There is no free pass. If you don't need medicine, don't take it. If you need it, absolutely take it. But there's no free pass. For every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction. Mm-hmm. And so every drug has a side effect. Every drug does something chemically or biologically in your body. And when you need it, you need it. And when you don't need it, you don't need it. So listen to your doctor. Don't self-medicate.
Thank you.
That's my PSA.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Particularly antibiotics in children drive me nuts. My wife always trying to give my kids antibiotics for every little thing. I'm like, no. They will be better in a day. Trust me, they're fine. Yeah.
My wife doesn't want to give them any, so there's probably a balance.
I'm with your wife.
Between both.
Yeah.
I will let her know. Yeah.
That's good.
That may sound odd from a drug guy saying don't use drugs, but
Don't use drugs.
yeah, but, like Nancy Reagan, don't use drugs.
I guess switching slightly gears, but you talk a lot about innovation, and I think pharmaceutical, healthcare, medical devices. But I guess I'll talk about aesthetics, which is a very big here in Miami and many other parts of the country. And you mentioned Botox twice, so I will quote you as like the founder of Botox or the inventor of Botox.
I was not. It was an ophthalmologist in Canada that invented it.
Okay. I was just joking on that. Yeah. But where do you see...
You want to talk a deal making? I'll tell you a quick anecdote.
Okay, sure. Please.
This is oversimplified, but mostly true. This wonderful ophthalmologist in Vancouver had a patient with severe fluttering eye. And enough that there are about 2,000 of these patients that have, you all probably experienced a fluttering eye for 20 minutes before you, but some patients have it forever and in an extreme condition. And she was trying everything possible to treat the fluttering eye. And she ultimately mixed some botulinum toxin, one of the most deadly neurotoxins in the world, and injected into the eye right here, and it stopped the fluttering eye. So, dozens of patients came to this clinic in Canada to do it, and one of the incidental side effects was the wrinkles here went away. And so we licensed it from her. We were an eye care company. Allergan started as an eye care company. And I'm oversimplifying this part, but I think we offered her $10 million plus some royalties on sales. Mm-hmm. She turned it down for $12 million up front. Her royalties today she would be getting, and probably for the next 30 years or longer, she'd be getting about $600 million a year royalty check. So I still see her. I saw her a couple years ago. She's perfectly fine with it. She's at peace with her decision, but really an amazingly smart ophthalmologist.
Oh, that reminds me of Victoria's Secret, who was sold for $2 million. So
right.
That's okay. Yeah. That guy was not at peace, though, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I guess the learning is always keep your royalties.
Well, if you believe in your product, don't give it all away. That's the learning I have.
I guess the question I had was from a business perspective. In this space that you have like a 30% success at best, and innovation is very risky, very costly, like a $2 billion mistake in some, well, not mistake, but like lack of success.
No, it was a mistake.
Well, I mean, you never know until you spend the $2 billion and you don't get the success. But I mean, either in the aesthetics, eye care, we discussed a little bit. How do you manage that innovation? Why do you say, as a CEO, as an executive, let's invest $2 billion in this innovation with a less than 30% success?
Yeah, I mean, it's like all things. It starts with great scientists, great teams, with deep therapeutic knowledge in the area that they're managing, and then I've always believed in assembling great advisory boards from the top KOLs and academics in the field. And generally, you may even develop it just around an advisory board, just around one product or one R&D program around one project. So really listen to a lot of people, get a lot of really smarter than me people in a room, and look for commonality of way of thinking, look for, brilliant ideas from brilliant people, and really trust your instincts to support the smart people.
Mm-hmm. I want to shift gears again and talk about social media. We see that as the chairman and CEO of Bausch Lomb, you're quite active on X, formerly known as Twitter. That is also has been a vehicle to learn about your many other ventures. But I would love to understand, what do you see as the advantages of engaging directly through a platform like X? And then also, how do you see, the role of a CEO in 2024 and the need or not to engage through those channels?
Yeah. So I got involved in social media a little earlier than most people my age, and it was because of my oldest daughter. At dinner one night, created an Instagram account for me and said, "Dad, you should do this." And so I played around with it a little bit, and this is when I was at Allergan. I think at that point we had a lot of employees. We were probably approaching 80,000 employees. And what I noticed was employees were following me. And so I went to my communications team and said, this was even before X, right? Or I got involved in X at least, or Twitter. And said, maybe we could do something with this in terms of, being the CEO of the company. And we started playing around with it. And I was one of the first to do it in corporate America. And back then we used to film lots of clippets of pictures. There weren't videos as much back then. Pictures of me at different events with customers or trade shows or at big employee meetings, whether I was in Shanghai or Berlin. And so employees kind of knew what I was doing and where I was, and it was just a really, different than a town hall or an email to employees. It became, and I quickly got up to over 1 million followers on Instagram. And then I started doing clippets of when they started to take video of business advice or rapid fire questions, and was quite successful on Instagram. And then the pandemic came and I stopped doing it. And I rarely post anymore. I do engage on, and I probably lost 300,000 followers due to lack of engagement. I've thought about getting back onto it. I don't know, I lost the energy for it. We now have the ability to send videos internally and communicate to employees more specifically inside of our network. But I do think there's more opportunity to do that. I think it's important. I think a big part of the job of a CEO is to be chief communicator, and to spend a lot of time. I always liken it a bit to, and this probably comes out wrong given the current state of affairs, a bit of a politician. You have your stump speech around strategy or what needs to be accomplished, and you go from small groups and manufacturing plants to different offices around the world, and you do that and you talk and you get people excited and aligned and energized around whatever the mission or purpose is that you're trying to do. And so I spent a lot of time kind of on the road talking about the company to our employees, right? And so social media is an enabler of that. I do think, I do some more stuff on X now than I do on Instagram, but I do avoid most of the political stuff at work. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is an appropriate place to do it. So.
Well, interestingly, it used to be.
I wish it wasn't that way, by the way, but that's just the state of affairs we're in.
Well, that's true. But on a lighter note, it used to be that the CEO was one of the best jobs that people wanted to have, or at least the kids. Now it's influencer. So you lost your chance to be an Instagram influencer during the pandemic. Yeah. But another, switching gears slightly, you're also chairman of Rome. And I was quite surprised because if you don't know Rome, and I'll ask Brent to talk about it, the whole idea is to reduce meeting times. And I was quite surprised, why would anyone want to reduce meeting times? Because it's like going to the bank and the post office. Everyone wants to have long meeting times. Why you're doing this?
Well, I will tell you the honest truth. I hate meetings. For someone who spends a lot of time in meetings, but I really hate meetings, right? And the one thing that I think the pandemic and Zoom and team meetings have made this exponentially worse, is now everything is a meeting. And meetings are, for the most part, are run incredibly inefficiently. And when you look at, for example, Bausch Lomb, we have 13,000 employees. We can, because we're in Microsoft Office and we use Microsoft Teams, we can track the time in meetings to the second, at least those types of meetings. And we can even pull the live meetings off of the calendar, and we do. And it is extraordinary, the growth over the last 3 years in meeting time, and I believe directly, inversely correlates to productivity. And so I'll come back to Rome in a second, but I started an initiative about a year ago. I sent out the first email to all employees that said, "I hate meetings" in the subject line. It was the most open email in the last 2 years. But I laid out that we need to stop this culture of work happens in meetings, and work, decisions aren't made in committees, and people need to be empowered to do their jobs, to do their work, and to make decisions and be supported when they do those things. And so we spent a lot of time doing that. We've done some very simple things. So in the default setting of Microsoft Office, meetings now are defaulted to 20 and 40 minutes versus 30 and 60. That in and of itself has saved tens of thousands of hours of meeting time. Now you need to justify why you invite people to a meeting. You need to have an agenda. You have to have specific actions, so on and so forth. Just good basic etiquette that gets lost, I think, because people just say, oh, let's get a meeting. Why don't you invite so-and-so? We'll have a meeting next week. The other things meetings do, that, and committees as well, and I really tried to reduce, we are required by law to have some certain committees. We need to have safety committees. We need to have SEC reporting, disclosure committees. There are committees that we are required to have. But if they're not required, I'm a fan for disbanding them, because committees are also a place where indecision goes to grow. I think that nothing drives me more crazy when I say to people, like, why can't we do X, Y, Z? And they're like, well, in a month we're having the committee meeting and we'll evaluate it at the committee. I'm like, I don't have a month to wait. Like, I have a bias for action. Let's get moving. And so this idea that you're waiting for your, pick on you, your faculty committee meeting to make an important decision that's 6 months away, and so you just sit for 6 months waiting for that event, to me is nonsensical. I know the world doesn't work the way I want it to work, but that's how I wish it worked. So I've been a real stickler at doing that. While I'm on that, I've been on this kick for a decade. I met a really an amazing entrepreneur here in Miami, and what makes me so excited about Miami is the number of entrepreneurs, particularly in the tech scene, that are coming here. A guy named Howard Lerman, who had created a company called Yext, took it public, did very well, and decided to leave as founder and CEO to start a new startup called Rome. And I met him here, actually in the gym at in Miami Beach, and we became fast friends, and now our wives are great friends. But he was starting a new company called Rome, which is a technology platform for distributed or remote offices. So it's very hard to explain. You'd have to go on Rome.com to understand it, but it basically replicates your physical office online, right? And so what does that allow you to do? It allows you to knock on somebody's door, ask a question. I could be on there and have office hours. Any employee anywhere in the world could come visit me. You could do audio meetings, you could do video meetings. We could all be sitting here and say, hey, we need to decide this now. Let's grab you. We knock on your office and bring you actually physically or video into the meeting. We don't have to set up a Zoom, get people's calendars, schedule for 30 or 60 minutes, right? There's spontaneity that can happen. And so there are a lot of other features on there as well. But to me, that idea was great. And when we look at, there are about, I think about 5,000 companies on Rome today, and many on the wait list to get onboarded. Their average meeting time is 8 minutes. And I love an 8-minute meeting. I'd love to get Bausch Lomb to 8-minute meetings. I've failed at that, but I'm not giving up on the goal.
That's a very good goal, yes.
Yeah.
And I was joking about the meeting times. Actually, I prefer the 0 meetings, and let's go.
Yeah, no, I know you.
8-minute and 16-minute meetings as opposed to 30 and 60 minutes. So
yeah,
we should do this a Herbert thing here.
Yeah, and I would say one thing that I would say, he asked me to be chairman of the company, and I'm not a tech guy, and I said, kind of, why do you want me? But ultimately, I will tell you, I've learned more from him about entrepreneurism. I've been a big company guy. I always thought of myself as entrepreneurial. Perhaps in a big company setting, it's easy to look entrepreneurial if you have initiative. But watching him work and the way he works and the way he inspires his team and gets stuff done really has been a learning for me. I've learned a lot being associated with him.
Yeah.
So when I met you, what I heard also from others is that a good meeting with Brent is a meeting that wraps early. So that is the number one priority. But maybe talking a little bit about leadership style, right, based on your many hats, right? I mean, chairman and CEO of Bausch Lomb, chairman of Beauty Health, and then the other 7 things that Dean Paul Pavlov mentioned at the beginning. How do you balance your time across each of these different priorities? What is your leadership style like? How do you empower the leaders that you work with? How do you make it all work? Because I think we all have a lot of things we would like to do, but we don't see a lot of people who can actually engage effectively in so many things.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a work-life balance element to it. We were talking about this earlier, but I made a decision a long time ago to do two things and do two things well, and that would be family and work. And doesn't bother me. I don't really have any hobbies. And so, my hobbies are my kids' hobbies, and then what I do at work. And I'm at peace with that. That may not be right for everybody, and everybody has to figure out where they want to set their priorities. But that works well for me. And so that's basically what I do. And I'm very happy and enjoy it. I think from a leadership perspective, I think, first of all, I'm very informal from a leadership perspective. You don't have to schedule my direct reports or even the global leadership team, their direct reports, so the top 100 people in the company. They can text me, they can call my cell phone, they can schedule time with me if they want, but I'm highly responsive. I have a kind of a philosophy I live by. Somebody else came up with that, I didn't come up with it, I forget who. But if it can be done in 2 minutes, do it right away. Don't let your to-dos build up. So for example, I was between lots of crazy stuff, but something hit me for doing Bausch Lomb stuff yesterday. But I had to deal with something for beauty health, but it was I just had to call the CEO and tell her she needed to pay attention to something. And instead of just saying, all right, do that later at the end of the day when you have free time, I just did it, right? So now it's off the plate. It's not something I have to worry about. And I think a lot of times people build up these little tasks, become big tasks because they hold them off too long. So my view is, even if it's on your walk to the bathroom from your office, if it's a 30-second phone call, make the call, get it off your plate, be done with it, check that box, and you're much more efficient. I also have a big believer. I have a very simple tenet with my employees, and I try to live by the same standard, which is if you say you're going to do it, do it. And I can't tell you how simple that is, but how hard it is even for like my CFO, who I greatly admire, for him to do. So if you said to me, we're doing budget reviews, I'll get you the budget by Friday. And I say mentally, great, I'll have it Friday, I'll plan some hours Saturday morning before everybody wakes up to review it. And then Saturday morning I get up and I'm like, why don't I have the budget stuff? I woke up at 5 in the morning to do this, where is it? Right, and that drives me wild. I'm like, what the hell happened here, right? And by the way, and I say this to them all the time, if you couldn't have gotten it to me Friday, it's pretty simple. Just send me a text saying, hey, I know I promised you this Friday, such and such happened, can I get it to you Monday? And I would said, sure. But nothing ruins confidence than just not doing what you're going to do. And I've made many deadlines and made many commitments that I ultimately I'm not able to deliver, but I always communicate to the person that I'm not going to be able to deliver and why. And it can be very informal, it can be formal, but to hide from the lack of deliverable, I think diminishes your career, your credibility, and I don't care who, everybody's going to wonder, well, you promised something, why'd you not do it? Mm-hmm. And so, those are the two things I try to live by. Tick off the small things as quickly as you can, and then do what you say you're going to do, and if you can't do it, communicate early, and 9 times out of 10, they'll say, great, get it to me next week, right? I understand. Yeah. So.
Those are great. I like everything you said. Shorter meeting times and informal, getting things done, the 2-minute, and reliability is very important in business. So talking about career advice, and I'd like to open it up to questions, so start thinking about your next question, so it'll be the last question. So career advice. And we have a lot of students here, and many of them, besides being want to become influencers, they also want to become CEOs, and I think that's a safer route.
I can't help you with the influence.
I failed. That was the light part. But I mean, for students who aspire to be CEOs or at least executives or even entrepreneurs, since your recent experience, I mean, what career advice would you give them kind of as they start their careers?
Yeah, I guess I have a few things I would say, but I think it's probably the most important is do something that you can find a reason to be passionate about it. And I've been recently giving this advice to my oldest daughter who just graduated from NYU, and it may take you a couple years and a couple jobs to figure out what you're passionate about, I didn't know that. I didn't want to be a lawyer. I went to law school. I didn't want to be in consulting. I went to consulting. I didn't figure it out. I didn't know at 18 what it was that was going to ignite my passion. But keep going till you find it, because you spend way too much time at work, particularly if you have big aspirations to lead an organization or have a senior leadership role. You're going to have to spend way too much time doing it that you'll never be successful at it if you're not passionate about it. And you just maybe have to find one aspect of what makes you passionate, but there has to be something. There has to be something that works. And I say this with the God-honest truth. There hasn't been a day in 25 years where I have woken up and said, oh God, I have to go to work. And I have a lot of friends that do. And I've never felt that feeling in my life. And I get it's called work, and you're only there because it's a paycheck, right? You're not doing it as a hobby. It's not called fun. It's called work. But I've never had that feeling where I've said, oh God, I can't, I look at my schedule, this is going to be a horrible. I've never felt that. I look at every morning, my wife thinks I'm crazy because she's not a morning person, but I wake up, I get up early, but I'm like, I jump out of bed, I'm ready to go. I usually go to the gym and then go to the office. But I enjoy every day. Even on the worst days, I enjoy the day. So.
Well, that passion really comes through
Yeah.
and every single day. Maybe we open it up to questions.
Absolutely, yes. Any questions? By the way, sorry, some have to leave because it was 10 o'clock. We have classes at 10, so some of the students had to leave, so it's not because it was
in
not
Miami,
exciting.
did they have to show up at 10:10? Is that Miami time?
Well, no, we're very strict here. And we have class at 8 o'clock
I meant
here.
Greater Miami, not University of Miami. But
we try to have
everybody's late in Miami to everything. So.
We try to have students start at 8 o'clock in the morning. So, first question, sir.
I have the first question.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that. So, as you might have heard, AI is a new buzzword nowadays, and I was curious, what is your opinion on AI, and how could it impact how could it impact you on the pharmaceutical end in terms of solving for new cures for diseases, and also for the business side of it?
Yeah, so I'm actually a big believer in the application of AI to innovation, to workflow, to efficiency. I actually, and I spend a lot of time with my team talking about this, and this guy's helped me with it a bit too. But
confidentially.
Yeah. Well, it's not too confidential.
Cut the video,
Yeah.
cut the video.
But I actually, and really do believe this, I think the application of AI to work, and in particular into our field, drug discovery, will probably be the biggest catalyst for change that I've seen in my career. And I was here for the internet, so which was a profound change over time, but I don't think I think it's exponentially more important as we think about AI. And so, we are looking at it in a variety of different we're actually doing it in a variety of applications. We started in our manufacturing lines, we have highly automated robotic manufacturing lines, but any downtime in that line results in millions of dollars of lost product and productivity. And so just having it for predictive maintenance and other, when you have, these are automated lines that are like 100 yards long. And so any break in the process is very detrimental. And so now the AI is pulling so much information, that there's so much information being come off these lines. There's tons of photo sensors. No human being could ever process that information at all to begin with, or in time that would actually matter. And now we can do that. And so I think that application in and of itself is just the beginning, but it's going to be massive. We're now using AI in drug discovery. We have a partnership with a company that has 10,000 patient records from retina specialists, including all the OCT diagnostics of the eye and tissue samples. And so now we're screening large amounts of data around drug candidates against actually known targets with actual biologic samples. That would have, things we're doing now in a day would have been a year, just a year ago. We're using AI in our selling organization to look at how to target and talk to doctors A lot of the issues we deal with is when you recommend a prescription product to a doctor for a patient, if that doctor or that patient doesn't have the right managed care coverage or insurance coverage, it's a waste of a prescription and an angry patient because they go to the pharmacy and it's $700 and World War III breaks out. And so to the extent we can better figure out in advance what's the right medicine for the right patient with the right copay, as an example, that makes us much more productive, makes the doctor much more productive, makes the patient much more happy. And so, those are types of applications we're looking at. We're now starting to look at finance applications in terms of all the reporting and analytics we do on our, numbers that are coming in from all over the world from multiple product lines. How do we do that to have instantaneous reports? And I actually hope it won't happen for 25 because we're doing 25 budgets now, but I'm hoping 20, and that's a massive exercise in every company that takes months. I think in 26 we'll do AI predictive budgeted. So I think it's massive.
Great.
Good morning. Thank you for being here and for making the effort. It was very interesting to hear your insight. Since you arrived this morning, your company's stock went up 8%. Is this a good time for investors to get into the eye industry?
So I am prohibited from making any stock recommendations. I will say something funny. Been a public company CEO for 15 years. I will tell you, I'm the person with the absolute most knowledge about the company and the least likely to be able to predict what the stock will do. And so this idea that people, outside of a transaction or a significant event, it's almost impossible to predict the stock day to day, and it is driven predominantly by algorithmic trading at volumes and speeds that we can't comprehend, and has little to do with the fundamentals of any business anymore. And so I can go on a whole rant about the stock market, but for individual investors, you're incredibly disadvantaged versus institutional investors. It is not a fair fight. So I personally stay away from buying individual companies because if I can't tell my own company, how can I tell from the outside of any company? Our company stock's up because there's rumors about an LBO that hit the press over the weekend, and so it's ARBs and event-driven investors trying to come in and predict the future.
Hello. So you mentioned a $2 billion investment into a drug that your company was developing, and you said that you have to have trust and faith in the team and to trust that they can make these decisions to ensure that the drug succeeds. So in that project, it didn't succeed, and I just wanted to know what were the decisions that you made to mitigate that kind of margin of error moving forward.
Yeah, so I would say this, in mental health, and we're getting better as an industry, but in mental health, let's back up. Pharmaceutical studies are all gold standard, and gold standard studies are placebo-controlled studies. And so, if you go to any consumer product, almost any consumer product, and they say clinically proven to do XYZ, if it's not placebo-controlled, it's garbage. Right? It can be manufactured, every vitamin, whatever, you name it, right? It's all garbage. Placebo control is the only way that matters for clinical data. And in mental health, particularly depression, as an example, it's such a multifactorial disease. And as much as we know about the human body and the genome and the DNA, we know very little about the brain. And now that is changing rapidly, and I predict over the next 5 to 10 years it will change significantly. But it has been an area where the biopharma and medical community operate largely in the dark. And so we have some ideas of the proteins that are misfiring or in the brain for most major depressive disorders, but we don't know exactly what combination for what purpose for each person is a little different. And so we did do a good phase 2 that was successful, so a smaller population of patients. But when you open it up to a much larger cohort of patients and you go against placebo, I will tell you in any mental health disorder, placebo is a really hard drug to beat. And this was an injection versus a pill. And when you inject people with placebo, it works really, really damn well. The mind is an incredible healer. And anybody who tells you otherwise has never looked at the science. But if I gave you if you told me you had an ailment and I gave you an injection of saline to cure it without telling you it was saline, but it was some wonder drug, I'm pretty sure it will cure it. So that's a hard standard to beat. I think the reality is we did underdose it, so we spent a lot of time and a lot of energy doing post hoc analysis of the sample. And generally, if you don't see a safety signal, this is what I was alluding to before, if you don't see a little bit of a safety signal in a drug like that, you're probably not pushing the dose hard enough. And I think that my working philosophy is that's the issue that we had there, but can't prove it without running another $800 million study.
So Brent, the joke about doctors prescribing TikToks is a good one. TikToks are good ones, right?
Well, actually, if you have any friends that were doctors in the 60s and 70s, they did prescribe placebo regularly. They had both a sugar pill and an injection, and I can't pronounce it, but it was placebo spelled backwards.
Okay.
And for example, it was standard care at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and it worked enormously well. And then some ethics committee got involved and said it was unethical to do. But for years, they treated patients with placebo, and it worked incredibly well.
So I've got a question on from when you left in 13 and when you got back in 23, how the business, and then in 23, how the cultures were different, and how, if any way, you had to adopt your leadership style in 23.
Yeah, so interestingly, the analogy I used, it was like somebody took the company, put it in one of those time capsules in the wall, and said, open in 10 years. And I got to open it in 10 years. Because of the ownership after I had left, really deprioritized R&D, which is really a detrimental thing to do in the health science industries. A lot of the things that I was working on when we left were still being worked on when I came back. The only difference is over the last almost 2 years, we've advanced a lot of those now, with a real reinvigoration on investing in R&D has been a real important part. And I also think the company was craving leadership in some ways. It had been kind of undermanaged for a decade. People weren't excited. There was not a kind of a strategy to play to win. It was more, they were on defense than offense. It's probably a way to say it. And, I know people like the University of Miami football, but it's more exciting when they're on offense than when they're on defense. That's true in business too. Yeah.
Except the Pittsburgh Steelers. So
Yeah.
You're a Pittsburgh guy.
Yeah, but you still like the ball in your hand, right? You hope nothing bad happens when you're on defense, which is why I say for business, but you score touchdowns generally, obviously, on offense. And people like to score touchdowns in business too.
I know you were mentioning the possibility of an LBO. Considering that Bausch Health, your parent company, manages substantial debt right now, and that in 2023, Bausch & Lomb accounted for almost 50% of its total revenue, do you think that Bausch Health could sustain its operations if Bausch & Lomb were divested from the parent company?
So we are completely separated today. The nexus between Bausch & Lomb and Bausch Health is they own 88% of our public stock. And so they act, from an accounting perspective in their filings, they do consolidate our results, but on a pro forma basis, they don't. And from a debt load, they don't consolidate our results. And so it really is, outside of a technicality, separate companies. And so what they do with the ownership of our equity goes to in part to their, vibrancy as a private or as a public company, because they have a lot of debt. So if they got several $1 billion of cash, then they could pay off, different levels of maturities, particularly the near term 26, 27 maturities. So yeah, I think it could enable a path to success for them, for sure. What they do with it is always what matters, which I can't control.
going to get you to think on your feet for a second here, but I was wondering, what's the biggest mistake that you think you've made, and what'd you learn from that?
You know, so probably the biggest mistakes, I'll say plural because I've made it more than once, is hiring the wrong person. And, you know, I always say that as leaders, the most important decisions you make are who you hire and who you fire. They don't get the same kind of attention. If I were going to go out and buy, you know, a $50 million company or a $10 million piece of equipment, there'd be all sorts of forums and presentations and checks and balances. But if you go out and hire a senior executive, you know, that could be fully loaded costs over a period of time. That could be tens of millions of dollars too. And so, you know, I really try to take that responsibility much more seriously as I've become more experienced. And I can tell you that in the past when I've hired senior executives to run a business or that have a completely different philosophy or moral compass, it is like a cancer, and it sets the business back in a dramatic way. And so I've tried to get better at hiring, using more criteria, doing all reference checking myself, and really spending time thinking about, you know, each candidate for each position that I look at. But made a lot of mistakes in that regard over the years.
One more, yeah.
So, quick question. As far as your dailies, the Bausch Lomb dailies, do you guys have any program to, not recycle, but to retrieve the used product for analysis en masse? Because I was thinking that the amount of people that throw data away in their trash can every day, walking around being little sensors, their eyes are not just optical sensors, but they're chemical sensors, and those things are sponges. They travel around the world, they go into airplane cabins, they cross borders, they cross buildings. And I mean, you could even subsidize giving them away for a cheaper price, just the data that you'd leverage after analyzing that. Do you guys have anything like that in the works?
We don't, and I've actually never thought about it, so I appreciate the idea. I think you're probably directionally right that the data, if it's pulled off in the right way with the right storage medium that comes off a contact lens after you worn it for a day about your health, is probably profound. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'll send you a royalty if we figure it out. I think the question is how expensive is the diagnostic to analyze it? Does it have to come into a central repository, or could it be done at point of collection? I'd have to think about that.
Just give him 12 million, not the royalties.
Yeah,
Absolutely. The bar has been set high.
We send you a
The
check for
royalties.
12 million.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they do, you know, they do analyze wastewater, right? For the same reason.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for McKinsey for sponsoring. My name is Victor Cuesta. I'm an alum from the University of Miami, and I also lead diversity and inclusion initiatives in ERGs. My question to you has to do with innovation. You mentioned R&D and doing that, and I'm a firm believer that a lot of that has to do, I work for Cencora, a top pharmaceutical distribution company, and I really think it's just getting the product to the right people, marginalized, the supply chain to be improved, healthcare coverage. What are you use these groups, whether it's employee resource groups, to leverage that in innovation in your company, and what do you see there?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'm not sure I know the answer because I've not been involved with a lot of those groups. I know people on the team do, but you know, I think there's always an opportunity to do everything better, and when I look at the healthcare system in the United States, it's clearly broken. I will say one of the issues we have is we have a real shortage of specialists, and it's only going to get more acute over the next 10 years. And so thinking about having, you know, the number of ophthalmologists are dwindling, and the number of people with ophthalmic disease are increasing, and dealing with that bolus, particularly in underserved communities, is going to only get more acute and difficult. And so, you know, I think one solution is to incentivize more people, perhaps with scholarships and create more residency programs in community hospitals and other places like that to get more physicians trained or specialists trained that can stay in the communities from which they came could be an answer. Creating, we just need more doctors. Or the other option is to give what we would perceive as lower licensed physicians like optometrists greater rights to practice off the edge of their degree. But something's going to have to give. And it's probably all those things above. Or there's not going to be one thing. It's going to be all these things. But it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue. And unfortunately, very few people talk about it.
Yeah. Maybe one final question, and then we will wrap up. I wanted to touch on the topic of networking and mentorship. Wanted to understand, how important have mentorship and professional networks been in your career progression, and any advice you have for everyone here today as I think about it.
Yeah, so it's been incredibly important to me. I really place a lot of value on the people who've helped me in my career, and I try to pay it forward by helping others. I spent a lot of my career, particularly in the first 15 years, in networking and building my professional network. You guys are obviously going to events like this are exactly the right thing that I used to do all the time. And it wasn't necessarily to see the speaker, it was to meet the people that were at the meeting in and of itself. And so, I did a lot of those. Some of them were had to get up earlier to go do it, had to, sit in a room with people I didn't know, and that uncomfortableness of introducing yourself and building your network, but it does absolutely pay off. So I applaud you guys for coming, not to see me, but to see each other. I think those are the types of things, if you can replicate it on a fairly regular basis, and great places like the University of Miami have probably too many events to even track, but there probably is just so many resources. I went to University of Pittsburgh, a state school, and those types of schools, at least when I went, were what you made of it. There were so many resources and so many activities where you could sit and drink beer in your fraternity, right? It was one or the other, and I chose the other, but if you have some initiative, I think building a network is worth every second you can take to do it. And as you do that, you will find the right mentors. The network starts the process, and then you'll find the right people to mentor you as you move along. Yeah. And that's, I think, it was critical to my success, so I think it is hopefully for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Brent, for your time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was wonderful.
We're tremendously inspired by all the things that you are doing, from fixing eye care to reducing meeting length time to 8 minutes, to all your other initiatives. Thank you for having us. It's been a privilege. Thank you so much, Dean and University of Miami Herbert Business School, for giving us this opportunity. And it's been a privilege. And thank you.
Hopefully you'll invite me back one day. I enjoyed it. So.
Absolutely, no, thank you very much, Brent. That was amazing advice, and even specific ones about many things. So, but the networking, the mentorship, and take advantage of your peers, and also take advantage of these events to meet the people are very important. Actually, we'll be having a networking happy hour as part of engaging students. We're going to bring people from the business community. That's one of the initiatives that to have to enable, encourage, and even get students to feel comfortable going to these events. Right. And for students, it will not be alcoholic drinks, so we can. I
was going to say alcohol makes everything more comfortable.
All right. Well, we'll. But maybe for MBA students we'll do that. But in all seriousness, a great conversation. Thanks to McKinsey & Company for your support, and enjoyed meeting you. Thank you very much. And again, thank you very much for coming, and it's been a great event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.